at work. And today, we have a very, very interesting topic for discussion. It's very important topic which we are talking a lot in the last time. This is a topic of well-being. And we will discuss this topic from the personal and corporate level with our great expert, Charlotte Stebbing-Mills. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, Tatiana. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm great to see you as my guest in my podcast. But before we are starting, could I ask you to tell a little bit about yourself? I think all my audience could be interested in you. And before it, my recommendation to follow Charlotte on LinkedIn at least. Charlotte.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I'm so happy to see when people bring these conversations to light. So thank you for that, because it's much needed. So as you said, my name is Charlotte Stebbing-Mills. I am the co-founder of a company called The Wellness Theory. We are an award-winning company based here in the Middle East, so specifically across Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And we are specializing in stress relief and collaborative workplace wellbeing solutions. And we make it easy for companies to navigate the complexity of workplace well-being and employee wellness, almost as two separate components, but they're intricately weaved together, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. And I've been in this space since 2005, so almost 20 years I've been in health and well-being, and I've got an array of different background when it comes to working for organizations, obviously working for myself, working at a senior level, burning out, feeling firsthand what that feels like, and obviously making it my mission to make sure nobody else has to suffer.
That's so wonderful. And I want to start the first question. Why do you think our topic of well-being and employee well-being especially become so popular in the last 2 years or 3 years?
Well, I think we don't have a choice anymore. In the past, I think there maybe wasn't as much attention focused on the numbers in association to well-being, because what we're seeing now across the board, particularly in the UAE, we've got 40% of managers are burning out. We've got 85% of employees are completely disengaged in the Middle East. We've got top executives considering leaving their jobs. 70% of them are considering leaving. That was based from Deloitte and Gallup research. So there's a lot of numbers telling us that we need to pay attention to this, but also people understand now that there's a choice. We don't have to stay and work for an organization now when we've got more options. And because of technology, the world has got smaller. We have more choice. And I think companies are starting to recognize this. So I think from an organizational perspective, I think that's why the big focus is on well-being. We're starting to see the power and the value in it.
I know what usually in UAE, the people work a lot. It's really hard work as people who is living there. And just now you talk about there are a lot of burnouts. If we talk about burnouts, talk about the decrease in productivity, how companies start to work with it, especially in a situation that usually they have a culture of hard working.
Yeah. I think the first thing is recognizing just how common it is. There was a piece of research done by Cigna here, which is a health insurance company based here in the Middle East. And they found that 98% of people are experiencing at least one symptom of burnout, which is a lot. It's a significant amount. So companies are now very aware that this is happening, but in order to tackle it, we have to start to look at what programs are already in place. And this, to be honest, is where I came into this workplace wellbeing field, because people would reach out to us for a stress management course or a burnout prevention workshop and things like this. And yet the year after, they'd come back to us for the same kind of training. And we was like, something isn't right here. Like, what is actually going on? What is really contributing to burnout? Because it's not always the individual's ability to be able to deal with it. And I think there are still a lot of organizations and leadership that are still believing that the solution is to teach the employees how to deal with their stress better. And yes, that is definitely a part of the puzzle, right? That's where the employee wellness perspective needs to come in. However, what we're typically seeing is that a lot of organizations are trying to fix the problem with the wrong solution. It's like me going to the dentist because I've broken my arm. It doesn't make any sense, right? I'm not going to get much support from the dentist. I need to go to the emergency room. So we need to start looking at the root cause. So for organizations, it's imperative that we start to look at why are we dropping our employees into the burnout river in the first place, instead of just keep trying to pull them out. So we need to be preventative, and we need to start looking at what are the root causes. And one of the main root causes is workload, is what we're seeing here. It's just the speed of which business is expected to play at, and the fact that we are always on with technology. Workload is definitely one of the most challenging things.
If they talk about the company's corporate level, absolutely agree with you. What if we don't change culture, if we don't change our approach to manage people, to work, that could be really difficult to prevent on the personal level. What is your first advices to the companies? Because the people from the different countries will watch our video. The first, what are the signs of burnout or some of problems, or our companies could see, and what the first steps we should do in this situation, or in the situation they want to prevent the burnout of employees from a corporate perspective?
Yeah, perfect question. The first thing we need to do is listen. You know, we have information. People know typically what burnout is. We know that the extreme end of the spectrum is when we collapse physically and mentally, and we typically have different health conditions that arise. But we know that generally, don't we? I think as individuals and as organizations, we've seen the darker side of it now. I think what we need to start looking at is listening to employees. So one of the ways that we pinpoint the first step for an organization is to simply do an assessment where we will listen, we will survey the teams, and we will be asking them a series of different questions around burnout, around stress, and around holistic well-being, to start to understand what are their issues. Because then what happens is we have some sentiment data in there where they can actually share their feelings, and they can actually say what they feel like is happening for them. And 9 times out of 10, it is basically the to-do list for then leadership. All they have to do is listen to that answer. And typically it's things like having boundaries, right, for my employees. Like, when I've finished work, I've finished work. It's talking to me like I am a human being, not like a cog in a machine. Typically it's things like being able to work on things that somebody's actually passionate about and they enjoy, to actually feel supported in the workplace. So the first step is to listen. It's absolutely to listen. That has to be the first step, because your organization might be different to somebody else's, have different challenges, especially when we look globally as well.
I want to discuss the topic of leadership. Sometimes we have leaders who think what hardworking is a norm. We are working very hard. They could have burnout, but I think they need to work more and more and more and overcome the problems. And also with this leader, we have the same problem with subordinates, because he or she asks all the time from subordinates to work harder and harder and harder. What companies or maybe HRs could do in this situation? How could we help this type of leaders? How could we change their mindsets? Maybe how we could help to subordinates? What is your advice?
I think you're right. It starts with leadership. It's easier when leadership are on board and they are actively open to change, or at least open to a conversation. So I think it is important to start there before looking at subordinates. However, it's for the ideally, it's best if the leader recognizes for themselves that they're struggling and is able to voice that in some way, shape, or form. One of the reasons we got so deeply involved in workplace well-being is because a lot of the leaders that we were coaching around burnout and burnout recovery and stress were getting such good results because they started to understand the issue. So I think the first, if it's HR trying to get their leadership on board, is to start to really perhaps highlight some of the things that maybe the leader is missing out on in their personal life. And it might feel like overstepping a little bit, but it could be a case of sharing different examples of, oh, what did you do on the weekend? Did you have some quality time with your family? Do you feel like you're spending enough time with your family? Oh, have you been working out lately? Do you sleep well at night? Just asking these little questions starts to put the little light bulb on for the leader to say, actually, I would probably prefer it to be better than what it is. And it starts to almost shine a little bit of a mirror. But then on the flip side, we can also have people that are like leaders that are actually really owning this and are already creating space to be able to actually share their stories. And the best success we've seen is when leaders are actually openly sharing their story of what's important to them in their life. Doesn't always have to be a burnout challenge. It can just be maybe what they're aiming towards, but just showing that human side of them, that personal side of them, starts to open up the door for subordinates then to start to fall into that sense of safety that they can perhaps do the same. So shedding light as much as possible onto the leader's personal well-being, that's where I would say that sweet spot is, but that can also take courage to do, and also depending on where you are in the world, that might be seen as disrespectful and things like this. So you must obviously take that advice and suit it to yourself accordingly.
I want to ask about 3 bad habits of company and leaders which you see and which you think could be the signs or reason for burnout. The 3 bad habits. Maybe previously in corporate life, we think, oh, wow, it's really good to, for example, you said working on a weekend. What 3 bad habits you could say you should work firstly as a manager or as an employee?
Great question. Put me on the spot now, Tatiana. So the first one for sure would be not asking people how they are. That's a terrible habit. How are you? How are you arriving today? Like what's going on with you? Is everything good? You know, just opening that space. Often because we are busy and we're already thinking about the next thing and 10 steps ahead, we forget that human touch. So I think it's a terrible habit when we skip that step. So that's the first bad habit. Because that creates a lack of safety for somebody to then be able to actually say, hey, actually there's something wrong, I might need some help, or I might need some training, or actually this is fantastic and we can do this better. We don't create enough space. So that's the first bad habit. The second one is treating employee wellness as something separate to workplace well-being and to overall business goals. These are things that are completely integrated. We call it a well-working ecosystem in our organization, where these 2 things, they work together as this beautiful dance between the 2. We don't have to have one or the other. It's important that we start to understand, okay, well, how does our business vision and what we want to achieve maybe for our customers or for our stakeholders, how does well-being actually improve that and help us move towards that? So the second bad habit for sure is treating them as if they are separate. And when we create a sense of separation, people start to tend to feel lonely, right? The numbers on the P&L start to suffer as well. So that's what I would say the second one is. And the third one, I think, is putting it all on one person's shoulders. Sometimes that is a HR person. Sometimes that is a person that is just enthusiastic about well-being, and suddenly they have to run it all for the company when actually they just like going to a yoga class. They didn't necessarily sign up for that. And the reason I highlight that as a bad habit contributing to burnout is because then you have your best people that are probably the healthiest in the organization to some extent burning out, and then that doesn't help anyone. Because we've got these unrealistic workloads that we're now applying to somebody else, but also we're entrusting a very, very big topic onto often people who do not have the training to do it. And that is a terrible habit for an organization to be doing, because that has a very detrimental effect and ripple effect on everybody around them.
It's a very interesting topic about responsibility. How do you recommend to divide responsibility in the company? Because it's really tricks. If you have HR, or sometimes I see the company have a wellness manager or well-being manager, and all leaders say, it is his responsibility. I'm not responsible for this. What is the best way to divide this responsibility? What this person could do, what leaders could do, the C-levels of the companies, what your recommendation?
Amazing question. I asked this, I was speaking at an event in Dubai last week, and I asked the question to the audience, who here is responsible for well-being in your organization? And 2 hands went up out of like 200 people. And I was like, well, actually, I believe at least that we should have every hand up. Everybody is responsible for well-being in some way, shape, or form. We all have an effect on the people around us. And I mean, science shows that within 10 meters around us, you know, we are affected by people. We can pick up literally stress hormones from each other. So there is like real science to support that idea as well. But also, we need to start to look at practically what does that look like. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, that everybody ought to perhaps play a part. But when we work with organizations, the best examples we have seen are those that put well-being KPIs into their performance management systems. So that can often be a well-being goal of their own, and it could be them achieving something that's important to them, and it might be actually spending more time with their children. That could actually be a KPI for them. It might be that they start fertility treatment. Maybe that's important to an individual. It could be that a KPI for one person in the organization is to host something else for maybe the men in the organization, right? Or to host something else within the organization. It can be absolutely anything, but something that is completely directed at well-being and not just numbers, productivity, and things like this. So the shared responsibility in a practical way, the best way I've ever seen is putting it into a metric so it can be measured. And that can also be obviously looking at things like staff turnover, absenteeism, presenteeism, and you can measure those things if you want to get a little bit more specific. But I would suggest everybody has a KPI to be looking after, because then everybody's interested. If their bonus depends on it, they're probably going to start to up their game a little bit.
I think it's really very important that everybody is responsible, because sometimes when we talk about well-being, we are looking for the employee loss, like on a subject, like on an object, not a subject. The object, what we have to do something for them, and from this perspective. But when we start to work the employees' well-being, we start to do something, but not all the employees understand what well-being is. And sometimes companies forgot about it. For example, HR managers know a lot. They have a full understanding what well-being is and how to handle it, and start to launch different programs, different benefits. And employees doesn't understand the basic level. Why should should I tell you about my family? Why do you ask me about my health and my weekends? What is your advice, your ideas? How to start implement well-being culture in the company? What should they get to employees for improving a level of knowledge, for improving their engagement in this topic?
So I think there's definitely an education piece that is necessary, is understanding what is well-being, because again, we're still using that very, very flippantly, even just in this conversation now, you know, because like workplace well-being, it stems all the way into leadership, like you've been talking about. It is about the mission, the vision, the values. It's about the communication. It's about the policies that are held. It's about the environment, health and safety, competency, autonomy, so many different things. And then obviously employee wellness, for example, is very much around like somebody's financial well-being and their financial fitness, their ability to be socially connected, their ability to regulate their own emotions and movement and nutrition and all these other things that we've heard of. So I think, first of all, there's an education piece that is absolutely necessary, particularly for leadership and anybody that is in charge of strategy. And we should all be able to look at the big picture of what well-being actually encompasses and actually start to unpack that. Because until top level does that, we can't expect somebody perhaps a more junior level in the organization to be aware. But I think we can keep it simple and just bring it again back to the human being. Find out what's important to them. What's important to you? Like they might say to you, work. They might not be ready to talk about their family and what they do on the weekend. That's okay, because that's not what's important to that person. You go to maybe to the office next door, somebody will tell you all about their weekend and their kids and what their kid did and maybe show you photographs and everything. So meeting people where they are, I think, is probably like an easy win. And I think also not pushing people. I've seen so many examples when we've gone into organizations to like revamp what their approach is. And in the past, they've forced people to attend certain things. It's like, right, we're doing this wellbeing session. You must be in this place between 1 and 2 p.m. And then they don't want to be there. See, there are other things they want to be doing. We shouldn't be forcing it. We should be incentivizing. We should be asking them, what is it you actually want? Because maybe somebody doesn't want to open up. That's okay too, because we can respect their boundaries so long as they know what resources are available to them. And this is why I love your question, is because you said about a culture. How can we create that well-being culture, right? And that then moves away from these one-off interventions, which when we can start to look at measuring the workload, we can start to look at perhaps reducing meeting times. You know, you don't have to ask somebody about their weekend and their family and their friends and what their best hobbies are. Maybe all they want is to have 10 minutes to themselves during the day. So maybe if we can chop meeting times by 5 minutes and gain back some time, fantastic. Maybe somebody needs to look at their culture and look at the policies they have, right? And is there a right to disconnect so that they are not being contacted on the weekend? These all contribute to the cultural element. And I think we need to kind of go back to some of those real basic things before we start making all these big programs with bells and whistles. I think we can just keep it simple sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree with you. And I want to ask you about maybe some cases, how companies implement well-being programs, well-being policy, and what helps them to improve it quickly. What they should look into, because they have the problems. From one side, the well-being topic is very complex. There are a lot of different topics, especially in the perspective of customization for the particular employees. From our side, if we start to do everything in one time, it will be too hard. So I need to drink water, I need to have exercises, I need to stop working on weekends. And so it was so huge. Yep. I prefer don't do nothing. I prefer to stay in the past. What, maybe in some cases, some advices, how it is the best way to implement a well-being culture in the companies, which steps you should pay attention how to do it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. So the best ways that I've seen, the best results that I've seen yielded from people's efforts and investment is when we assess first. So we mentioned about listening earlier. Just listening. Even if you're not going to fully assess, just run some focus groups with your team and just start to understand what are they saying and start with those things. And that's the easiest win. But the thing that we've seen the benefit with is actually assessing holistically both sides of that employee wellness and the workplace wellbeing perspective, looking at what are the high risk areas, what are the things that are actually causing the biggest issues, and what could be our low-hanging fruit. What are those quick wins that we can actually start to look at? So for example, if social connection scores low, we don't need to just suddenly put on lots of team building activities. Maybe we just need to let people have maybe the ability to go home an hour early on a Friday so they can go and see their friends and their family. You know, so it's really understanding what are those pockets that are causing the most problems and then focusing there first. And then what we can look at are then the policies that support those things. And that's where other people's role within the organization can come into play. So it could be that you've got a fantastic marketing team and they're going to actually help you to market some of the wonderful things that you've got going on. So that then becomes an open invitation, right? So maybe there's a newsletter that comes once a week or once every 2 weeks that tells you that if you want to phone a mental health support line, this is the phone number and it's completely private. Maybe there is a note on there to say that there is going to be a session on stress management. Maybe there is a training opportunity for somebody to do mental health first aid. Maybe there is an opportunity to join a volunteer program project that helps us to boost our social connection through the workplace. Maybe there is an opportunity to come and give your feedback on the company. You know, it could be any little things like this, but the communication piece and leveraging the strengths of different employees and different teams can be extremely powerful, and it can phase out any of the overwhelm, right? So if I'm in HR, I can focus maybe on that policy piece. If I'm in marketing, maybe I can actually focus on the communication piece, right? And we're working together, we're speaking to each other to do that. But as an employee, they have choice and they have freedom, and they're not being forced to do it. But what they also get off the back of an assessment, hopefully, if the organization is using a good quality assessment, is the employee gets something immediately. So, for example, one of the employee wellness assessments that we do, not only does the organization get a report, the individual that has taken that assessment will also get a report for themselves. So they will see the areas that are most important to them that they can start with. So they can start to, again, look at the easy wins first, because that breeds confidence. It starts to build habit. And then we can look at the next one and the next one and the next one and build from there. So having that phased out approach is absolutely necessary as well.
Mm-hmm. I have one more question about communication of well-being. Because when the companies start to work, I think it's very important to communicate the employees. What is your advice? Should we engage, for example, C-level persons in it? Should we do it like a very wonderful marketing campaign, or consistency is more important? What is your advice about communication, this well-being policy of the company, if we really start to work on it?
Yeah, fantastic question. So yes, absolutely, C-suite should be involved in the communication 100%. If they are even better, you're more likely to get buy-in from everybody else, because now they feel okay too. So absolutely yes. So typically what we have is something called ongoing corporate hygiene, whereas there is constant communication. Essentially, there's almost like a well-being toolbox that every employee knows they have access to all of the time. When they're onboarded into the company, the communication is already there. They know where to find it. And there is perhaps like I said, a monthly communication that gets dropped in consistently without fail. And then on top of that, if possible, I mean, just doing that alone is already a win. Okay, that's already a massive step in the right direction. If you want to go that step further, adding in different campaigns throughout the year, just like a business would for their clients, for their customers, we would do the same thing. So maybe there is a campaign this quarter on social connection. Fantastic. Okay, what's that going to look like? What noise can we make about this that makes sense from every angle, from a policy angle, from a leadership angle, from an activity angle, from maybe a digital support resource angle? You can look at all of those different things. If you want the absolute gold standard, go a layer higher than that and get a media campaign with your leadership talking about those subjects and filter that through to the business. And it doesn't take leaders long to do that. If you've got a good marketing team, get them behind their phone, take a short video, chop it up, make it amazing, and then filter that through to everybody else. Something as simple as that could just take maybe 10 minutes, less than that to do. And it can just be a really easy win to just start to open up that conversation even more.
Well, it's really wonderful. I think it's really wonderful examples how to communicate these ideas. As for me, I think what also could communicate it inside and also outside organization. For me, a well-being policy, a little bit strategy is a huge part of employer brand. The companies, it's really, they have a very good impact on it. My next question is about employee advocacy. Now it's really interesting what is one of the biggest trends, what the companies start to engage employees as advocacy for the business, for promoting employer brand. And for example, we have an experience when a company launched a well-being program, and we launched employee advocacy of well-being. So this is the employees, you mentioned them earlier, who is really like this topic. We are living in this mode, and they say, wow, our companies start to work on it. What is your recommendation? Should company work with this type of employees? How to engage them in supporting your program?
Hopefully they're already enlisted in the vision of the company, right? So if they're already enlisted in that vision, it's going to be probably quite easy to say, hey, there's this really fun project, do you want to be part of it, you know? But most people, they want a sense of purpose in the workplace. They want that, they're craving it. So I think it's absolutely necessary to throw it out there, and also not just approach specific people you think might be good at it. Let people like step up for it. Let people volunteer for it if they want to. That's hugely powerful, but give them the support and the training they need to be able to do it. This is often something that we see is that we get all excited, we're going to launch this wellbeing program, somebody's really passionate about it, but then they get busy and the momentum is lost. So it cannot be on one person's shoulders. So having a team of champions is always the way to go. And then making sure you follow through in how you're going to support them and incentivize them as much as possible as well. They are going to probably want to do it out of the goodness of their heart, but they also have full-time jobs and probably families and other responsibilities. So if possible, incentivize them in some way, shape or form, and follow through on what that incentive is. So it might be paid training that they go on. Maybe it is a mental health first aid certificate, for example. But how can you then support those champions? But I do think it's a fantastic way to create a bit of a buzz, bring different personalities into the mix, different ideas. It just opens up a whole new world when it comes to being able to actually land these initiatives. And to your point about personal company branding and talent acquisition, it's fantastic, but it must be authentic. It must be authentic. And we've seen a lot in this region of organizations saying one thing, and then you go to work for them and it's a completely different story. So it must be authentic as well. Like, this absolutely must.
Totally agree with you. I want to ask you about mistakes, because now you mentioned one of the mistakes, not be authentic in your policy and what you are talking and what you are doing. What is maybe 3 main mistakes you see when the companies launch well-being policies?
Oh, so when launching, I think the first one is it not being part of a strategy. And it's just, this is a nice idea. I saw this person on LinkedIn, they seem nice. Everybody liked that post, so I'm going to implement this thing. So having a strategy is absolutely necessary. Launching, I think the first mistake that we see often is not having a strategy. We see the most fun thing that maybe we see popped up on LinkedIn or something like that, and we think, oh, that's a great campaign or initiative, let's do that, without actually really listening. So having a strategy is absolutely necessary. So a big mistake we see people make is they'll do these one-off things, or they'll try something and they don't really know why they're doing it. The second mistake for sure would be also not measuring the success of a program so that we can learn for next time. And that's a big one. And the third one, not having follow through. Not following through on what you say you're going to do. That is the fastest way for an organization to ruin its reputation for well-being within an organization, and that will really affect your ability to get buy-in the next time you want to do something. So if you say you're going to do something, be congruent, be accountable, and actually deliver. So I always think, under promise and over deliver. Start there, and then start to build your campaigns and go forward.
It's really great. I want to ask you about maybe the person who are really interested to know more about this topic. What is your source of inspiration in well-being topics?
There's so much, but I think relevant to this conversation is a lady called Jennifer Moss. She is the author of The Burnout Epidemic, which was published by Harvard Business Review. Her work is fantastic. For me, reading the way she talks about well-being and burnout specifically in the workplace really made me and our business look at the role we are playing within actually mitigating burnout and stress. Because I think, and it's very prominent still now across the industry and across the globe, that we're still trying to do wellness interventions when actually there's more systemic issues at play that need our attention. And her work has been fantastic in educating me, my team. She's also been on my podcast as well. She's a fantastic guest. She just really knows her stuff. So she's been a huge inspiration, and her work is extremely valuable. So definitely recommend her.
It's really great. And I have my last questions, because I close to the end of our podcast. My last questions all the time. The 3 main tips to our audience in your area. What 3 main tips what you could get to people and organizations worldwide who are really interested to become the organization with a good well-being strategy for their employees?
Yeah, I think it's the opposite to all the mistakes and the bad habits that I've been talking about, I think. But I think that, the main one is listen, whatever that may look like. It doesn't have to be a big, fancy, expensive assessment. just listen to your employees. That's absolutely the first thing. That's still the hurdle that people fall out in the most. Keep it simple is a tip I would say. Like I gave an example earlier, is like keeping just that human connection. Like keep it very, very simple. Just start with those things before you invest any money into it. Listen and just be human, be nice, be kind. And thirdly, a big tip I would give is educate yourself, understand. Even if you're not leading well-being, even if you just want to play a part in that, educate yourself and then start to just tell the person next to you, share it with your team, and just perhaps try one little thing every week or every month or every year even to just be that little bit better. And it will already make a difference.
Charlotte, thanks a lot for this conversation. And I strongly recommend my audience to follow you on LinkedIn and to listen your podcast because you mentioned it. And I know what you have, a wonderful podcast about well-being topics. I think there are more ideas. And I say you need to educate all the time. And I think you and your ideas and your podcast could help. Thanks a lot for your participation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for shining the spotlight on all of these topics. It's absolutely necessary. You're up to fantastic work in the world. And I appreciate you. Thank you. And to everyone listening.
And thank all of our audience worldwide. I'm Tatiana.